Shannon, what clearly sticks out is that line about a suspected shooter firing multiple shots from an elevated position outside of the rally venue, which would synchronize with some of the things we've been picking up on social media about a man dead on top of a roof outside of the rally itself.
And witnesses who were there on the scene have talked with our...
And then this, I don't know, this came to me, so I just put it in there. I see the Capitol, and I see, first I see a person at a desk, which I'm assuming after the fact now is like a president or the president. And then the Capitol, and I get like overthrow, cancel Constitution, demands, tear down, disable, New World Order. So I don't know if Elon's trying to become the president.
Naeem is an audiovisual artist and certified HRVG remote viewing instructor who has gained recognition for his expertise in multiple remote viewing methodologies and his ability to blend artistic skills with psychic techniques. His work with the Future Forecasting Group and various remote viewing projects has showcased his unique approach to exploring unexplained mysteries and predicting future events. In this conversation, he talks with me about consciousness and the importance of the artistic visualization aspect of utilizing remote viewing to see the future in the event stream. He shares a couple of his most recent sessions covering the first Trump assassination and seeing Elon Musk in the White House almost 2 years before it happened. Sit back and enjoy this provocative and insightful conversation. Well, welcome to the Nexus, Naeem. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
You have been getting quite the reputation over the last year or so with some specific events that you were involved in with your craft and skill of remote viewing. And some of the most amazing stuff that I think anybody who's trying to use any divination tools or techniques, in fact, I've noticed a lot of the psychics are starting to talk about, well, I'm doing tarot and psychic and remote viewing. They're all tagging remote viewing onto their little bag of divination tools. But you have been just delivering some amazing work. And before we get into some of those things that I think are going to be fascinating to explore, how did you get into remote viewing? Did you have to grow your hair in order to get into remote viewing?
I get that question sometimes, actually. Yeah, well, it started for me more than maybe 15 years ago now. I started getting interested in just alternative information in general, whether it would be conspiracy theories or consciousness research. I just stopped watching TV and started, more reading and looking into alternative spaces for information. And that got me into different forms of meditation. I found Robert Monroe's books, Journeys Out of Body. And I found that whole idea of an out-of-body experience was very interesting to me at the time. And that led to finding out about Stargate, reading about Stargate online. So it went from, I was never really interested in remote viewing per se, or even really any psychic type of work. I was just interested in the consciousness aspect and what is reality, what is consciousness. And when I read about the Stargate remote viewing program that the government was doing, and that it was pretty down to earth in terms of, I was reading that these guys were just sitting at tables and doing this thing, whereas the out of body stuff kind of felt more mysterious, like, how do you track that? How do you know what's going on? Whereas the government program seemed like, okay, there's manuals for this and these guys are apparently doing this. So I decided to look and, started to read some of those documents and found some manuals that were around at the time and started practicing it for myself just to see if it was real. I just wanted to see, what is that experience like? Is it legitimate? Is this something, way out there, or is this something based in reality? And it wasn't too long after doing it that I started to realize, like, yeah, there's really something here. And that led me on a whole other journey, just really practicing and refining that skill. At the time, there wasn't many ways to see remote viewing. So there was a lot of books, and I'd read everything I could find. But it was hard to really make a connection or relate. There wasn't anyone to really speak to, or, YouTube didn't really have many videos of anyone doing remote viewing or anything like that. So it was kind of like I was just doing it on my own and dabbling in it. And it wasn't until probably Farsight, some of that early Farsight stuff with Dick and Daz and Courtney, I saw something like that. I saw one of those videos at a point, and that's when it kind of clicked to another level for me, because I saw someone doing it in real time, which was completely different than reading about it, right? It's like, I like to say, that's like reading about playing a sport and then seeing someone playing a sport, right? There's like two different things. It's like you're imagining it one way, and then you see it, and it's like, okay, that's how this works. And so that really inspired me and kind of elevated my game to the point where I was like, okay, I got to be able to do this as good as these guys. I got, now that I know what it looks like, I got to be able to do it like this. And
well, to your point about knowing what it looks like, wasn't the advent of going to the whiteboard and filming that really, to me, kind of the breakthrough for a lot of people to actually experience what you saw, is watching Dick and Daz and Edward do these whiteboard live sessions, and you're going, you can see the process, you can watch what's going on, and they're consciously engaged while exoterically, maybe, non-locally expanding their consciousness to some target ID.
Yeah. I remember watching a lot of Edward Reardon's videos. He has these videos where he's doing like, an hour and a half full session. And it's like, as someone who knows what the remote viewing process is like having done it myself, and then seeing him do it, who is someone who's more experienced, and you could see you see the input, you see how he's working it out, you see how the data gets recorded, and it just made the whole thing make more sense. It made it much more real. And I started doing the same thing. I started saying, okay, I'm going to record myself. I'm going to, start to record my own sessions here, because I just felt like no one knows, no one knows what's going on here. That's how I felt at the time. And it's like,
and a lot of them still don't, right?
Yeah. So that was kind of the beginning of, just not really to even show it to anyone. It was just, I'm going to record it, and whoever's interested in this will find it. That was kind of my idea at the time.
Now, how did you get involved with Dick and Daz and the Future Forecasting Group now?
Yeah, so my YouTube was, for a remote viewing channel, it started, a lot of people were getting interested in it. I was on the Discord. There's a remote viewing Discord and Reddit, and I would post things on there. And Courtney Brown actually saw some of my work and emailed me, and he asked me to do some work for him at that time. He gave me some lessons in SRV, and we were talking, and I did a few targets for him. And he was, he knows Dick, he knew Daz, and I had been sending Dick Allgaier emails. Like, I found his email online, and I would just send him emails and ask him questions. Not really getting too much responses at that time. But once I started talking to Courtney, he kind of tied the knot there. He said, oh, Dick, here, here's this guy Naeem. He's wants to learn more about remote viewing, and that kind of is where that relationship started. And Dick started giving me mentorship over a number of years. I was learning from him, and I just kept putting out work. I started doing a monthly world events type thing just on my own. Like, I was not working for Future Forecasting Group yet. I was just doing it on my YouTube. But I would always send Dick my work. I'd be like, hey, look what happened this month. Look what happened this month. And they would send me targets every once in a while. They would send me like a crypto thing or some other targets on the side. And I guess it just got to the point where the company grew to the point that they were looking for, to add someone new. And I kind of was just there on his mind, I guess, with the work I was providing. So it kind of just worked out like that.
So I want to get into some of the most recent work you did, because that's where, the real meat and potatoes are. I think of, reality is having the best way to, in my opinion, to gauge your grasp of reality is to cast a prediction and see how it turns out, right? And if it works out or you get close, varying degrees, you know that you can look at what you're doing. And this, to me, ties back to the whole RV process, because there's a number of delineations. You get scientific, controlled, extended, right? I'd like to talk a little bit more about that as well. But before we get into that, as you were getting into remote viewing, as you were exploring this, your artistic side of art and music, was that your main focus of your energy, and then this remote viewing thing kind of dropped in?
Yeah, it was. At the time, I had a studio where I would record and do my artwork, and that's where I spent, a great deal of my time. I was, essentially living out of that space at the time. And that kind of had me a little bit isolated from society in a way. Like, I wouldn't really go out that much, or, I wasn't really doing all the things that people my age were doing at that time. I was very much in my own little room, working on my art, working on music. And then once the remote viewing thing took a hold of me, I was, I could say I was pretty obsessed. Like, I would wake up at 7 a.m. and do a session, like record a session for first thing in the morning, get up and record a session. Got every book I could possibly find. Like, I was consuming so many books at the time. Anything online that I could find about remote viewing, I was reading it and taking it in. And it did derail, I guess, my other creative endeavors. Everything else I was doing kind of came to a bit of a pause as I dove into, engulf myself in the remote viewing mindset and process. But it was so rewarding. So I almost didn't notice at the time. It wasn't about getting paid. It wasn't about any of that. It was just purely a passion project. It was just, I knew I had to do this for whatever reason. I was just following my heart in that way. So it is kind of, I would say coincidental, but I don't really believe in them in that kind of way. But yeah, the way things have worked out, it's kind of like something from the future was kind of pulling me in that direction. Yeah.
Could you say that the artistic expressions and explorations that you were doing with both imagery and sound and music, maybe were in some way kind of preparatory for what you're doing, how remote viewing has become so important to you? The visuals and the sounds are very important in the whole protocol of gathering data, right?
Yeah. Well, when I really first started doing remote viewing, one of the things that I noticed that was very familiar was when you're writing a song, and like, okay, writing lyrics, it's like what I would do is, you write a line, and then you need to have the next line connect to it in some way, whether, let's say it's a rhyme or a concept. I would always write it, and then I'd write the first line, and I would go to write the next line as if I knew what it was going to be already. Like, I wouldn't have anything in my mind, but I would just go to put my pen to write. And whatever that thing inside is puts the next word in place. So once I started doing remote viewing, that was very familiar to me when it came to probing, going for data. It was pretty much the same exact phenomenon happening there, where it's like, okay, well, what's the smell here, or what's the concept here, and I go to write it, and right in that moment the inspiration comes, and I just write it out. So I do think that being a creative played a big part in maybe my success and being able to handle remote viewing. And
do you think it's the imagination component that you have? You said that the remote viewing basically took you over, right? And that whole experience. To me, that in my experience, that would be something like I would discover something, and my curiosity would just get insatiable, and I would then go chase that out in this field of imagination I've got, and hope I found my way back at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Genuine curiosity is a big part of my personality, and I think it's one of the main driving factors of what makes someone a good remote viewer or not. There's a difference between wanting to be psychic, or wanting this thing to work, and genuinely kind of pursuing, genuinely following your curiosity. Those are two kind of different things. One is like an idea. One's this idea of like, yeah, I'm going to see this thing in the future, or I'm going to solve this problem. Whereas the other is like existing in that moment and, tapping into whatever that little signal is that comes from the inside. And that requires you to genuinely be curious. I could want to be psychic. I could want to see this thing, but that's not really how it works. There has to be that part of you that's actually trying to find the answer in that moment, and that's not really that's not thinking about the future. That's not thinking about the past. That's not thinking about, oh, how am I going to look, or am I going to get this right? None of those are in your mind at that moment. So, Dick, when I was learning, Dick told me the type of mind state or the type of intention or focus that you have to have when you're remote viewing. It's like you got to be that old lady who's in a closet and someone's broken into the house and she's hiding in the closet, and then there's a bump. Someone's out there, and so in that moment, all your full attention is going in, what's that sound? Where is the person? It's like, that's the kind of mind state you have to be in. It's like, you're not existing anymore. You're becoming that input. Your full attention, your full focus is on that thing. And that's something that's, you can train, you can try and develop it, but I think some people have it, more naturally, and it helps. I think that's what really makes a good remote viewer.
I think I agree with that, and I would say it is going into and with a flow, as in the event stream, right, in the frequency fields. In fact, I have a philosophy that I'm hopefully going to have the book out here soon called Informatica, and it's the idea that the subtitle is The Metrics in the Matrix, and that everything is information. It doesn't matter what you look at or what you experience, there's something about it that is a measurement, a pattern. We're pattern recognition oriented in the way that we function and learn. And that pattern recognition happens in an infinite field of frequencies, which is where everything comes from. So to me, the stream is constantly on. It's always in motion. and it always seems to be creating more of itself, and seems to have a proclivity for novelty, for adding and creating new, right? So how does it do that? It does it through this infinite field of frequencies that we call energy. And we say, okay, well, everything is energy. Quantum mechanics and all the quantum folks are finally getting into, hey, everything is a wave, right? Everything is in motion. So I think what happens is, as that is constantly moving, there's a frequency stamp of every instance, regardless of how minuscule you want to time it. But because the frequencies and the waves and the cycles within cycles happen, they leave a mark. And that is what we basically call the past. So our memories are these marks in the event stream of the frequency fields that have happened. And we're never in the now, we're always in the next, because the minute you say now, that's gone and you're in the next. And so to me, and this has been my hypothesis, I'd like your thoughts on this. It seems to me that the concept of non-local consciousness is what remote viewing is basically attenuating to the frequency stamps of a certain frequency. It doesn't have to be in the past, doesn't have to be in the present, doesn't have to be local, physical, ethereal, material, or even future. It's really attenuating to the event stream and looking for that frequency stamp that occurred. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, that's kind of the theory that I learned HRVG methodology is the type of remote viewing that I use, and our whole ethos.
That's the Hawaiian Guild?
Yeah, the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind, our theory of what's happening when we remote view is that there's an information field, and our consciousness is kind of like a smaller field within the greater field. And whenever you're connecting to a target, there's a part of your awareness that's resonating, or, however you like to term it, displacing or resonating with that target, with the target site. And it's more like I think it's like tuning into a frequency or, a vibration, and information then moves from that, whatever that vibration is, and we match that, the remote viewer is matching that, and kind of like emulating that information.
So it's kind of like a old time, analog radio, where you're dialing into the station, and you can get, depending on, sometimes you get to hold the antenna and become the antenna to get the signal, or put some rabbit ears or aluminum foil on it, but you're attenuating to that frequency, right?
Yeah. I think that's what's happening. Yeah. And
so when you get there, when you're tuned in, all of a sudden you have information flow.
Yeah. And even like been doing this for a while, and there's, in video production, there's the idea of like frames per second, right? Which is a frequency, right? So like the monitor will be refreshing at 60 hertz, like 60 times per second. Or the lights in your house are probably refreshing much faster than that, but we perceive it as a constant light source. I think that the remote viewing signal, or the information that we perceive when we remote view, is a frequency that's out of sync with what we perceive every day. So let's say if we're perceiving at 60 hertz, the remote viewing signal may be a little bit more than that, or a little bit less than that. And so it's really when we shift our awareness to tune in to that other frequency, we get flashes of that information. And it literally, to me, it's happened many times to me, it literally is flickering sometimes, like, it comes in as a flickering image. So I think that the remote viewing signal is just is a different frequency rate than what we're, I guess, when in our waking conscious state, we're not in sync with it, so we don't, readily perceive it, but it's just outside of our perceptual, ability. And doing the remote viewing processes or meditation or, dream states or, ERV, things like that, pushes us just slightly in that direction so that we have what we call, a flash of insight, and we're able to perceive those things for a moment. But I really think it's physically like that, where it's coming in at a slightly different refresh rate than what we're perceiving in our physical reality.
So how different is the protocol and the training that you did on your own in the beginning to what you're using now?
One of the main, I guess some of the main differences are most of the remote viewing manuals and things out there are, for the most part, based on controlled remote viewing, CRV process. And I'm not knocking on it or anything like that. I've studied it and I use it. The main difference with the HRVG methodology that I learned was what I consider is using the highest bandwidth, our input that is the highest bandwidth or highest resolution is our visual field. So like whatever 80+% of what we perceive at any moment is visual information. Like humans are visually oriented creatures. Dogs go around with their nose and we go around with our eyes. That's what we scan the room with. That's what we orient ourselves with. So most remote viewing processes kind of neglect that visual field, and they rely more on receiving impressions and putting them into words, or receiving impressions and trying to sketch them through feeling. Whereas in HRVG methodology, we learn how to close our eyes and train our subconscious to place imagery in a specific place on demand. So, and I believe that the visual field is where the most information at the highest resolution can be communicated in a given moment. So that kind of changed the level, the level of information that I was able to consciously perceive and make sense of went, sometimes 100-fold from what I was doing before. Because one moment of seeing something is 1,000 words, then trying to get 1,000 words, one word at a time or something like that, right? So
well, and the advantage there is that in the visual and the light range, we have much more access to the frequency fields that are available than we do hearing, sonically and audibly. But also on the body, when you get feelings, it's hard to find some words to figure out what the hell that feeling is that's going on. And you got to run it through the mental process and see what kind of images pop up or are emoted because of that emotion. So your work in art must have been something that you can also benefit from, using that particular aspect of the technique, being more visual in the data you're going after.
Yeah. When I started learning how to see things in remote viewing, that actually made me go back and really study more into my art and how to see better, how to draw better. Like it kind of worked together. You've probably heard this said before, like, like a doctor does remote viewing, he's probably going to be good at doctor type information. He might get some medical stuff, and that's the stuff he'll pick up on. I think it's a similar thing. I mean, if you're a visual person, you're probably going to get some visual, you're probably going to be more attracted to or more easily process the visual information that's available in the signal. So, I mean, really, when I saw Dick Allgaier do certain sessions. And, I'd been doing remote viewing for many years up until that point. Like before I ever saw him work a session, I had been doing remote viewing and I was pretty good at it. I was decent. But when I saw him, some of the stuff he drew, honestly, I couldn't believe it. I just said, how is that possible? I just didn't think that was possible. So learning it, learning how that works and now being able to do that myself, it's just, I really think that we're playing ourselves short. We need to put more focus. We need to put more time and effort into developing our visual side if we really want to go somewhere with remote viewing. I think we're leaving out a very big chunk of, what's useful in remote viewing. And I did a talk for IRVA on this, last year about thinking in images and visual processing and the nonverbal, right-brained processes of consciousness. And I think that is one of the things that we're missing. And it's the thing that changed my remote viewing, 180 degrees. And it made it more interesting for me. It was getting to the point where I felt like I'm hitting a plateau. I'm hitting this barrier where it's like, why can't I get more information? Why can't I get a better idea of what the target is? Why does it feel like I'm separated from it? And I think it had a lot to do with that resolution, that bandwidth. You know what I mean? It was like us trying to have this conversation over text messages instead of just getting on a video call and doing it.
I just got a real painful groan in my gut just thinking of that. That visual gave me pain. So it sounds to me, and this is one of my pet peeves of society in general. When I am a guest on other shows, I give them my little thing about who I am. And I was on Jimmy Church last October, and I gave him my standard little thing, which is I'm an autodidact semiotician with an insatiable curiosity and an overly fertilized field of imagination. And the first thing that stops everybody is autodidact. So what the hell's that? I've kind of heard that. And then semiotician, what's going on there? It's just using 25-cent words to make a sentence. Autodidact is self-taught, right? Which is what I think we all are, actually. Even those with the stamped pieces of paper hanging on the frame on the wall, they may have gone somewhere to get the information, but they taught themselves. And I think that that's really how we function, and we need to kind of change reframe the way that we think about learning and the fact that that's what we do. Now, semiotician is somebody who studies the symbology and nature of languages and symbols and words, right? Well, in my Informatica model, one of the key tenets that I think is really important for people to understand is that language is the operating system of the mind. The words, the symbols, the letters, the sounds, all of that constitute the language that you use to explore and explain the reality you inhabit and engage with is going to frame it for you. And one of the examples I use is the word student. And the word student in English is typically referred to someone who is engaged in the study of something with the path to completion. There will be some kind of, yes, you get a diploma, stamp, certificate, whatever. And then you move on to something else. In kanji, in Japanese, the word for student is ka, K-A. And their meaning of that is that once you are a student, you were always a student of it. You never stop being a student. It is a perpetual, continuous thing. That change right there, just understanding the word student from that perspective, would completely change Western society. People would stop. I think they would get an upgrade on the whole learning model and the concept of schooling versus education, and all of these things they're broken systems now. We are in the process, I think, of going through, people have called it the Great Reset. To me, I looked at it and I said, well, the first thing is happening, there's a great awakening. And that awakening has got eyeballs on shit that people didn't know was out there to have eyeballs on. And that's causing a great reveal. And it's like, well, shit, I didn't know that stuff was out there, and I didn't know these patterns and these nuggets were all connected in some way, shape, or form, and I don't like the way they look, actually. And that great reveal, after seeing all these patterns and so forth, is leading to a great rethink. So people are stopping and going, oh, wait a minute, I need to rethink this shit, because the way it has been hasn't clearly worked out very well at all. And that is leading to what I think is the great reimagining. People are going to be able to have a free, open-minded, observational, neutral look at reality and try to reframe and reorganize how reality actually is. And it's going to come down to consciousness, which is what you and I started wanting to have a conversation about, or I certainly wanted to have a conversation with you about. Because consciousness is, I think, an ontological model of reality, is to me what explains everything that we experience. It explains the reality, the way it works, its nature, its habits, its functions, its characteristics. The concept of law is a man-made construct. I don't think the universe or consciousness has laws. It has it and its nature and its habit and its characteristics and the way that it unfolds itself. And I think the non-local experience and expression of consciousness, which is what you have developed an incredible mastery of that craft, I think that's where the real liberation of reality is going to come for the future. I think more and more people, when people see that, just like you shared, you weren't looking for remote viewing. You were drawing and you were making sounds and music and you were being a happy hermit. I know, because I would do the same thing and have done for a long time. If I'm just sitting here in my little creative studio and I've got nobody bothering me, I can determine what feed of nonsense I'm letting in, and I can instead focus on, I want some great music and I want to get out my guitars and I want to just fill this space with the sonic satiation of me going, yes, I would definitely rather do that. And it makes a difference in the way that you eventually attune yourself. The long way of going around the point I wanted to make, which is the interdisciplinary components of all of the things that we experience and that we have, is, I think, what you are embodying. You've brought your art, your music, your mind, your curiosity, and you were working with all of that stuff collectively and independently, and then this thing called remote viewing stopped by and said, hey, want to go for a ride?
Yeah, it does require a range of different skill sets to be good at remote viewing. And that kind of ties back into what I was saying before. It's like it's an interesting idea that you could be psychic. It's a compelling, desirable thing. A lot of people would like that. They like that idea that, I could tell you what's here, or I could see the future, or I could see across time and space. Everyone wants to be able to say that. Everyone would love if that was true. And I do think it is true in a sense, but for it to actually happen successfully, that's a different story. You know what I mean? That's going to require a certain amount of practice and dedication. And I think that's the part that people don't see that part of it yet. They don't understand that, it takes a long time to really develop the skills and to make it second nature. It's like playing a sport. Even the greatest, baseball player can't hit a home run on demand sometimes, right? It's like there's so many factors. How is the pitch coming in? How's the wind? How's the crowd is affecting you? There's so many different things that come into play. remote viewing is similar in that sense that there is a certain amount of you got to be humble to a certain sense.
You got to kind of suspend anything that we would classify as ego.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not about if your mentality is I'm the best and I'm going to hit this target every single time. It's like you're probably not going to have as good success as you think you would. It's more of like a Zen approach where it's like you might work for 2 hours on a target and then you might just have to dust it off and say, that was wrong. And you can't be like, oh, that was wrong. Damn. And why didn't I get it right? And it's like, it's not really from that approach. It's for me, it's more like that was wrong. Okay. Now for the next one, it's like, yeah, it's from a different place. You got to approach it from a different kind of mentality. I'm never really thinking about being right when I'm doing remote viewing. And that's kind of what the methods are there to help you with. So if you're constantly thinking about being right while you're doing a remote viewing session, you're not gonna be able to interpret the information, right? You got to be kind of like a still pond. If you're thinking and worrying, that's gonna create waves, right? So, a certain amount of time and discipline and repetition has to go into it before it really starts to pay off. And I think a lot of people stop, too early. You know what I mean? They learn about remote viewing, they dabble in it, maybe they have a couple cool experiences, but then the hard part comes where it's like you got to fail a whole bunch of times. You got to get it wrong, a couple 100,000 times. And
Yeah,
that's
it's like
part
that axiom. It's like that axiom: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah, yeah. And
And,
the whole mentality that, and I learned this from Dick. It's like, I've done a lot of great remote viewing work and, I've got, I'm pretty accurate. I can, get on a target and I could tell you a lot about it. But the whole saying that I go by and that he taught me is you're only as good as your last session. That's how I think of it. So it's like, I'm not even, I'm not going to come out and brag about all these things that happened. I'm just saying, for me, it's like, I'm only as good as my last session. And in that mind state, anyone could be a great remote viewer. Someone who just started yesterday could do a session today better than me. It can happen. Obviously maybe not, but maybe it can, right? So that's kind of the way I approach it. It's like discipline, developing the skill, and you got to have a bit of a neutral approach to it. You can't be easily dissuaded and you can't be easily inflated, where it blows up your ego and you think you're the greatest in the world. So it's walking a kind of thin, it's walking a thin line to be good at it, really.
Well, have you seen Third Eye Spies, Russell Targ's remote viewing, about Stargate?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff in there, one of the most fascinating stories from that time was Pat Price, who was a sheriff or a policeman or chief or something, and he has zero training, zero exposure to the fact that there was even training or some kind of method or protocol that could be used. This guy just shows up, just starts flipping through. Yep, that person over there. Here you go.
Yeah.
To me let me ask you, what do you think that kind of psychic, and maybe psychic is even the wrong word, which is we could have another discussion about, but those kinds of abilities, do you think that's just something that person just is naturally attenuated to the field to be able to go see instantly? What is that, do you think?
It's hard to say in some cases, but I think it's usually tied to different life experiences. Him being a police commissioner, maybe it's that need for knowing or being in that heat of the moment, having to solve something, an informational need that needs to be had. Maybe that's puts him in a certain mind state. Yeah, I think some people are just from what's happened in their life. Some say it's related to different traumas or different experiences that may have dissolved, the typical kind of ego or mask that we have on a day to day. Yeah, some people are just, very gifted in that sense. And I would never consider myself to be that. I was never, I had some precognitive dreams and stuff like that. But what I do when I remote view is definitely something that I developed through the practice. And now I can do it more casually, but it definitely was something that was developed over time. But there's definitely people out there that are like Pat Price, and they don't know a lick about taking a class or having to learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even know that there's a name for it.
Yeah.
They just kind of do it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your experience with remote viewing, particularly, the big one that you hit last year was the assassination. I mean, that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, that I remember. You talked earlier about how you're attenuating to a visual, and sometimes it's like a flash and like a flicker, right, of a scene or a set of information. Describe what you experienced when you saw that event, when you were in that session. What was that like?
Yeah. For Future Forecasting Group, we, at the end of every month, we do what we call world events sessions. And this is where we try to perceive the major upcoming news events over the horizon. So this is a bit of a, slightly different approach from a typical remote viewing session, in that I am consciously going into this trying to see the future. It's not like a set target, it's not in a feedback folder. It's something that's going to occur. It's something that we're hoping is going to occur. So I was working this session, and we start off.
What month was this? April, I think, or March?
Yeah, I think this was in April. I think we published this in April. Yeah. And we were looking forward for the quarter, the quarter of the year, the next quarter. So we were looking for the next few months. What's going to be the next big events that are going to occur. So we start off collecting, low-level sensory information at the beginning of the session, and this is in like a beta mind state, a awake and alert type state. And I just, I close my eyes and I look and I see a person in front of a crowd. Just for like a second and a half, I see a person in front of a crowd, and from there I start to probe for associated sensory data. Like, okay, I saw this scene. What's the sounds there? And I hear people talking. Okay, what's the smell? What's the taste? What's the temperature? Things like that. So that builds up kind of like a low resolution scene. So I have I'm putting all this information together, but it's not anything I'm going to jump to a conclusion on yet. It's a very much kind of like a skeletal framework of what is happening at this target. So
now, are you writing the information as you're seeing it?
Yeah. So I'm sketching these things. I'm, filling in little cells, little boxes where we record the information, and then we assemble it on a single page. So there's a whole bunch of, kind of like casting a wide net. We collect a whole bunch of little lines of data, and then we try and put it together on a single page intuitively. So it's like, okay, where does this thing go? Where does this sound go? Where is this person standing? And we try and put it together. And so I had a person in front of a crowd, large crowd of people, And really, that's all I had at that point in the session. So we take that and we move into what we call S4. And this is where we try and isolate each part. So if there was a person there, we're going to try and look at that person in detail and try and find out more about that person. We want to look at the area that they're in. We want to look at the people in the crowd and see what's happening with them. And this happens in more of a alpha state. So this is like bordering on like the daydream type, mind state whenever we go to do this. So prior to this part in the session, I'll be seeing things for maybe a second, like a quick flash. Whereas once I move to this part of the session, sometimes I could see something for 4 to 12 seconds, depending on how strong the signal is. So going into this one, I knew there was this person in front of a crowd, and I'm saying, okay, I want to see what happens here. And I close my eyes and I look on a place that we call Blackboard. This is that area that we train ourselves for the subconscious to place the imagery. And I saw a man doing a speech in front of a crowd. And as I'm going to, draw this, I'm starting to draw it. As I'm drawing it, more little things kind of pop in as I'm trying to record it, probing for different information. Like, okay, what is it? What is he talking about? Okay, it's political. He's charismatic. He's animated. People are, engaged in this guy. He's the center of attention. And then I saw, just like a quick flash, I see a person with a rifle, up and to the left. Like it's hard to explain. You kind of just know things. I just knew that this guy was up and to the left, so I just draw this guy somewhere, elevated and off to the left. There's this sharpshooter. There's someone with a rifle. So I sketch all that, and I'm just getting the sense that this is like an assassination type event. And as you can imagine, at that time, you record some data like that, it's like, well, your conscious mind is going to start to come in and start to think it knows what it is, right? It's going to want to name it and say, oh, this is this person or this is that person. So at that point, I kind of had to leave it there. I said, okay, if I try and get anything more on this, it's very likely that I'm going to add some stuff in that's maybe not there, right? So that was that part of it. And I had another visual in another session for that same target. I saw, looking down the scope of a rifle, I saw someone taking aim, and I got very similar data. So this was the second time for that month that I was seeing someone in some kind of assassination type event, going to occur.
So did your monkey mind immediately go to this is Trump?
Yeah. That was we try not to say that, I don't want to go out and say that, but
you don't want to project it on it because you might pollute the data, right?
Exactly. And yeah, you don't want to destroy the stream of information, but that was very much not only in my mind, but I'm sure everyone who was watching, they're probably thinking the same thing, right? So we published that, we put it out, and kind of just went on to the next thing. That's all we just got to put it out there and then go on with the work. And I think it was June. I can't remember if it was June or July that, when it actually ended up happening.
It was July 13th, and it was significant for me because my birthday's on the 15th, and that was Monday. And then, Cliff High, of course, and he had his predictive linguistics that there was some kind of energetic event that was going to happen around the middle of July. And I'm going, shit, man, not on my birthday. Come on. And then when I heard that Saturday night that the attempt had happened, I was like, okay, this is the event that apparently Cliff was seeing in his linguistic predictions. But how did you connect instantly when you found out about it? What happened?
Oh, I was at a restaurant near here, near where I live, and I was having a drink, and the bartender was talking to someone else, and they said, "Oh, someone shot Trump at a rally," right? And I wasn't really thinking about the remote viewing data at that moment. It just didn't really sink in at that time. She's like, "Oh, someone got shot. Trump got shot." So I said, "Okay, let me look at the news," and I pulled up BBC, and it said Trump falls at rally or something. It didn't say anything about him getting shot at the time. It just said like he fell down or walked off the stage or something like that. So I kind of just said, okay, whatever. This is something silly. And then maybe half an hour went by, and I went back and started seeing, on Twitter and different news media started showing the actual videos and of what actually happened. And that's when I was like, okay, this is it. Yeah, this is exactly what I saw. This is exactly what I drew. And that was, kind of a surreal moment. I can't really recall. I mean, I wasn't around when JFK assassination happened, but there hasn't really been that kind of event, on such a public event. Assassination attempt on a president hasn't happened in a long time. Not that I know of.
Well, Reagan would have been the last one when Hinckley or whatever his name tried to take him out. So that was one of the things that I noticed when I looked at it. I said, okay, I've been a conspiracy analyst for 30 or more years, because every time I looked at reality and I listened to the narrative, I said, something's not right here. The narrative's not fitting with the reality that I'm experiencing. So I've said for a long time that everything, at least from JFK, and if you want to go back on the whole alien, UFO, UAP, EIEIO stuff that's going on, I call it the ufology community now. But you can go back to Cape Girardeau and even into Italy and all kinds of stuff. But I think what we're seeing is all of these things up until the smartphone, not the cell phone. Do you remember when the Nokia, the flip phones came out, and it was like, holy shit, I could walk around with, a Uniblab in my pocket. And then 5 years later, you've got a, quantum computer in your pocket, you're the ultimate Uniblab. The access to information that people now have to go and look for things themselves is going back to what I was saying about the difference between schooling and education. And we're really going to see a transformation of the learning paradigm because of the access to knowledge and because of refocusing on, you start with consciousness and everything flows from there. So if you start there, then your chances of finding out what's really going on and having a more successful navigation in it are going to go up big time. But at that event, one of the things I said, okay, there's never before has there been a public event with this many recording devices at it. The amount of information that was absorbed instantly at that time is going to cause any kind of cover-up to be next to impossible. And that, to me, was a significant event in the event stream of people realizing, oh shit, people have got information devices all over the planet now, and they're now all interconnected. The whole drone thing that happened recently with people going, all right, well, what's this? It's like, well, I don't know, looks like it's got FAA regulation it's hitting, because it's got the green and the red lights and it's kind of doing its thing. And I'm not sure why I was wandering off on that, but I want to come back to this event. So what was the feeling that you had? That you said it was surreal. Did you have a full body, full conscious flow of like, oh shit, I was dialed in when that happened?
Yeah. I mean, it's happened before. I mean, it's happened many times, but not really that many of them were an event this big. I definitely kind of went back in my mind to when we recorded that debrief. And, sometimes it's like, oh man, I wish I said more, or I wish I did more on that, but it's a bizarre kind of feedback loop that happens. It's like you draw this thing, you describe this event, you put it out there for the public, could be completely wrong. I'm just doing what I do. I'm just putting it out there, and then there it is. It happens like clear as day. And some of the details that were in my drawing, like I had the screen behind him, I had the projectile streaking behind, and his arm was up, pretty much like what all the major photos were of him. I had it drawn in my drawing there. And it's just like the amount of information that comes in those flashes, it's more than the conscious mind can process. It's more than the remote viewer realizes. So all I can do in that moment is let my let my hand go where it wants to go, and sketch out whatever's inside of me at that moment, probe for some follow-up information, and try and keep it as clean as possible, right? Before you ruin it, it's a small window of opportunity is how I see it. There's a window of time where it's like, you have access to this target now. Once you get to a certain point, once you've collected a certain amount of information, there's a much higher chance that you're going to pollute it with your own opinions and stuff like that. But it's, it fascinates me every time. I'm a bit numb to it because I do it all the time, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, there it is. It happened again.
It's got to be a fascinating experience to have have enough of experience with it where the profundity of it, how just absolutely dead on it can be, and yet you can't go into it looking for that. You just have to go into it to see what happens, and you've got to do it and let it go and move on to the next, and let the data, prove itself over time.
There was one of the criticisms I got on that data. Some people were saying it could have been anyone, or it could have been any event, or whatever it was. So there was yeah, okay. So there was a couple months later, what was it? I think August we were doing world events again, and I see a guy with a gun, and I'm probing into it, and I get, this is another assassin type event, right? And I'm saying, okay, this time I'm going to look at the person's face. And that's what I told myself. I'm going to draw this person's face. I'm going to look at their face so that there's no questioning it, who it's going to be. If this really happens, I would have drawn him. So I look, I close my eyes, I see this person, and I draw them. So I draw this guy, and I say, there's going to be a high-profile assassination attempt. He's going to flee, and there's going to be like a manhunt. Like police are going to shut down the area and try and find this guy. That's what I described in my work. And then it was the next month was the Ryan Ruth assassination attempt. And my drawing, people can go look at it and make up their own mind, but I saw that guy and I drew him before it happened. I drew his face. So people want to try and, calculate the probabilities of what that is. I'd love to hear about it.
The only people that get wound up about stuff like that and don't see it for what it is, they have a whole bunch of other issues that are unresolved. It's like, if you got to get wound up and go cherry pick stuff that is clearly, you're making up so that you can feel justified, then you have an ego problem.
Yeah.
You got some narcissist shit going down. So that is empirical data. And that's one of the things that so many of our sciences, hell, even the other divination tools need more of is empirical, demonstrable, credible data. And I got to tell you, as a one who wanders in the woo and looks for all of the stuff that's going on out there, seeing the kind of results that you're doing and your team with Ed, Dick, and Daz, and Sean's been knocking it out as well. It's been fun watching him come along. But you guys, the track record of being able to use that non-local consciousness to go see what was, what is, and what may be, is I think it's a gift to the upgrade of humanity.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get the attention and the respect that I think that it deserves. I mean, if those skills are things that, like you said, you didn't go looking for remote viewing. You kind of fell face first into it, you know? Yeah. And the next thing you know, you're covered in it and you're loving it. Those skills, the psychic abilities are that you're using a protocol and a methodology. You're basically using a tool set to go decode the metrics in the matrix.
Yeah. Yeah. I think society, for the most part, is, there's some fear behind those ideas. Trying
all manufactured.
For them to accept that it's too hard for a lot of society to accept that could be possible. It's so much easier to say, oh, well, why haven't they won the lottery yet? Or why haven't, it's so much easier to brush it away with these stupid kind of, comments than it is to actually sit there and look at the information and study it over time and say, okay, maybe I thought it was a coincidence, but now that I've seen it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from all these different people, maybe I should take it a little more seriously now. It's just easier to put it off onto something else, whether it's technology. It's okay for technology to do amazing things. We're fine with that. But when it's human beings doing it, it's like, no, we gotta, we can't accept that. I don't know what it is. It's, I don't know, maybe it's the responsibility or the implications of what that means. Some people, I guess, I've experienced this in my personal life. Some people find out what I do and they're scared, they're scared I'm going to see something about them or I'm going to know something about them that they don't want me to know. So it's like, there's a lot of different threads that come from this. And for whatever reason, it's a hard pill for humanity to swallow. But I'm with you in the fact that this is a tool that I think we were using stuff like this in the past. How else would have cultures in the past have made it as far as they made it? They must have had foresight. They must have known things that they didn't learn in the conventional sense. They had insights, they had intuition. And for the most part, our modern day society, we still have it, but it's barely functioning to the level that it would have been in the past. And when it does happen, we cover it up and say it's something else. You know what I mean? We make up excuses for it. Yeah.
Get thee behind me, and
yeah.
all that crazy shit. I'd like to go into something that we were talking about earlier when you were talking about the importance of the visualization and that mental blackboard, right? Where that's a space where you try to get the visuals, the images into. Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's a specific spot that we close our eyes and we look in that spot always for getting in visual information from the subconscious. So it's kind of like a mental screen, or that's the visual stage for information to show itself. Yeah.
So when you were describing that, you also said that you think that that's an area that needs to have more focus, and people will get more out of their sessions and just out of the process and the protocol of remote viewing. That visualization was accessed or focused on more.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the first things that I teach when I'm teaching remote viewing, the first thing we do in a session in HRVG is called a visual ideogram. So, you're probably familiar with a spontaneous ideogram, which is like this, the scribble. We do a visual ideogram first, and this is where we close our eyes. So first thing in the session is we close our eyes and we look for 1.5 seconds. So it's done just that fast. And we immediately draw what we see. And, I've seen some amazing things. Some of my students have drawn some amazing things. You can see the whole target in that 1.5 seconds. It could happen. It's not going to happen every time, but that's the type of power we're dealing with when we're talking about the visual field. Like, you could literally just see the target in the first second of your session. Like, all these things that we do in remote viewing and all the different methods and things that people are doing, it's like, yeah, they help and they have their purposes, but if we could get down to the real, the nitty gritty of it, it's like, yeah, we could close our eyes and see what's there. You know what I mean? The information is there. We just got to learn how to decode it and in the right outlets, right? And that's the example I've given the talk on it. It's like using dial-up, right? It's like, we're not going to use dial-up internet for this conversation. It just can't happen, right? Similarly, in remote viewing, if you want high resolution, if you want the experiential type data, which is obviously what is desirable if we want to give a good report, a coherent report, or if you want to orient yourself at the target. There's remote viewing and getting some things right, and then there's actually knowing what was happening. The remote viewer who actually knows, like, okay, I was here and this was happening. Those are two different things. So
Yeah,
visually,
Dick's bilocation moments.
yeah. So it's like, if you could see what was there for a moment, your chances of orienting yourself are much higher, right? You say, okay, I had this perspective and I was looking in this direction and this was here and that was there, instead of there's a structure, there's a sound, there's water, there's a voice. So it's different levels of organization and resolution of information that can happen depending on how you approach, the remote viewing process. And it takes, for the most part, it takes a lot more work and failure to develop the visual aspect of remote viewing. So a lot of people try it and they say, I don't see anything, and they give up. You know what I mean? Whereas it takes time. You got to keep failing. You got to keep trying, and you will get those moments where you see it. And that's what do they call that? The black swan. That's okay, if you saw it that time, well, that means you can see it again. And that's the kind of mentality that you have to work towards. And I wasn't just seeing the target when I first started doing it. I had to fail a whole bunch of times and fall down and get back up and do it over and over again. But now I can pretty confidently sit down and say, okay, there's a guy there. Let me see him. And I can see him and I can draw him. So it's it's a work in progress that people are, they gotta stick with it. It's something you gotta stick with. Yeah.
So, I'm a geezer geek. I've been in tech for over 40 years, actually 50 if I go back to my punch card days back in the 70s. I used to be a Univac 1701 key punch machine technician. And so I've built software and had all that tech stuff for a long time. That was my main corporate career. So I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing with this whole misnamed AI and they're really expert systems, this whole field that's going on, and all of it's basically, in my opinion, it's Siri, Alexa, Google, Bing on steroids. It's the next iteration of that. And it's all misnamed. It's not artificial. It's not intelligent. The hype, the hyperbole, the muss, fuss, sex, and sizzle that's being tossed around it is just a la .com back in the turn of the millennium. And I suffered through that as well. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, there's some really, what's happened is these expert systems the language protocol for the prompting has and the access to data through what they call LLMs, but it's not really what it is, but it's all language-based search. And it's got enough computing capability to where it is able to aggregate the pattern recognition of the words that you've put into your prompt. And that's what it does. But it's gotten pretty damn good at it. The image generations, the video generations, voice. I mean, I've got a half a dozen of them that I use on a regular basis, and they're just getting better and better. So my question to you is, on the whole idea of focusing more on the visualization and the visual component of what you're doing with remote viewing, do you see any way that these expert systems could be used as a part of that process?
Well, I know there's a lot of people that are using, trying to use the AI image generation to, like, they'll put their session data into the AI and then let it generate images to match up with their with the session data and stuff like that. And I mean,
Is that working, or is it at that level yet?
I mean, to a degree, I mean, it does give an image that in some cases is better than anything the person could draw. So I guess in that sense, it can be useful. For me, I'm very much into developing the human part of it. And I don't think anything will ever match up to you drawing what you saw as a human being, like what you experienced in that moment. If you take that and put it into an AI, yes, it may produce a nice image, a nice, pretty image, but I don't think it'll ever match up to what could be if you learn how to draw what you saw in that moment. I think that's, and the drawing and the seeing are like two sides of the same coin. That's the problem, I guess, that I have with that idea. It's like, I'm just going to put the words in and let it do the drawings. And okay, I mean, that can work, I guess, but seeing it and then drawing it is a part of the same process. It's the same thing. So if you want to be able to see it, you're going to have to get good at drawing it. That's kind of like the crux there. And I think that's just, I mean, why wouldn't you want to develop that? I mean, to me, it's just
Right.
like, I don't want the AI to do that part for me. I want to experience that part. That's what makes.
Yeah, it feels to me like being old school analog. You know, I want to be able to sit there and have that
it's like
tactile visceral experience.
I was there, so to speak, so I'll draw it. You know what I mean? The thing, it wasn't there. I don't want to play a game of broken telephone with the AI, but
yeah, because sometimes you're looking at a visual and you have to search for the words to even describe what you're seeing. And if the AI is going to require you to put some words in there and you can't pick them up from what you're seeing, it's like, well, you go away. Give me a pencil and I'm going to draw this thing out.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what it is, but it looks kind of like this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have nothing against it, and I think it'll be a great tool for many people. But my focus is on augmenting human consciousness and the human abilities. That's where my main interest is. I'm not really super interested in the AI thing. I mean, it's there, but I haven't gotten super deep into it or anything like that. Yeah. I think it's kind of overblown for the most part. Yeah.
I've been pounding on this for the last few years. I have my own technology stack of a model that I built for the future, which is based on tokenization and expert systems replacing all of the stuff that is broken and we're using now. And we're actually seeing this happening with Elon and the Doggy Boys. I mean, they're going in there and just saying, well, we have built a system that goes in and looks for things, pattern recognition, and where it finds stuff that doesn't end well, it throws a flag up and we go look at it again. That's all this stuff is. And that's all the AI tools actually are, is they're just pattern recognition guarded with guardrails over a prompt, over a specified data set. And it's always static. You can't have sentience. the people that go on about, well, AI is going to come take my job. And it's like, well, it's going to replace the function that you may be doing that's probably unneeded and can be gotten rid of. But the people who use AI are the ones that are going to get rid of your job.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's going to be an efficiency boom, because the interrogation of existing systems will reveal the inefficiencies. And that is where the real hope, I think, of that technology is going to be going forward. But we're in the middle of AI wars. I'm calling it's the bot battle. I mean, they're all out there trying to outcompete one another, and they don't realize, I think they do, and something they're trying to figure out how to navigate it. But in the end, there can't be one AI. There's not going to be one AI that everybody's going to use. It's going to be an open source assistant that will gather agents that you define, that you want, and configure for the way you want shit done.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a commodity, in my opinion. And I think that's where it's going to be very useful. But you guys, you've done so in the crypto viewing, having to go poke along the blockchain and the crypto world of the tokenization. I don't know, Dick, he drops his regular vids on the blockchain's coming. Everything's going to be tokenized. And I completely agree with that. Just from a technology perspective, trying to gauge my grasp of the reality of the environment that we're in, that we're going to be all tokenized. Your identity is going to be your currency, and you will be your own bank, because the architecture and the infrastructure will enable that to actually, for the individual to have that sovereignty and provenance of their assets. But when you guys go look at AI and you go look at cryptos, that's like the wild, wild west out there.
Yeah, it's definitely a different kind of subject matter for remote viewing. Like, how do you remote view a cryptocurrency, right? That's not really something that people were doing.
How do you do a bit and a byte out there in some kind of energetic form that's always moving?
Yeah, we kind of had to develop some new ways to approach that kind of information, because there isn't, I wouldn't say there isn't, but the sensory kind of data that you would typically use to describe a location or a person or an event isn't going to be necessarily the type of information that someone who wants to know what's going to happen with the cryptocurrency. I mean, telling you.
Well, is that why you haven't hit the crypto lotto?
Right? Yeah. So it's like we had to find out different ways to approach how this cryptocurrency, it's not going to have a smell and a taste and all that kind of stuff, but there's people associated with the cryptocurrency, so we can look at those people. Or there's people who are going to be in possession of that cryptocurrency, so we can tap into those people and see, how are they feeling, or what's their life like. Trying to, experimenting with charts. How can you forecast charts using your intuition, which is something I developed a way to try and predict the movements of a financial chart, and had I've had really good success with that. Being able.
Is it like the associative RV? Is it along those lines?
No, this is this could work hand in hand with ARV. So I think ARV technical analysis and this methodology that I created can kind of be used to like triangulate on on what exactly something is going to do. And it involves every single day, like let's say for a month, every single day of that month, precognitively, doing this in advance, trying to predict if an asset is going to move up or down, and then trying to kind of douse for which days in that month are going to be the peak and the trough. So when is it going to be the highest and when is it going to be the lowest in that month? And for, I had some of the numbers crunched. It was like over 80% accuracy. I was able to predict when the peak or the low would be every month for Bitcoin in advance. So if someone was trading just purely off of buy low, sell high, they could have made, they would make money, not knowing anything about the price, the specific price, but just going off of up and down. They could have made a lot of money. So there's different ways that, we're approaching this and trying to make sense of it. Because obviously it's not easy to call the exact price of what financial asset's going to be. So it's been fun. I mean, a lot of our subscribers need that chart that I do. It's in high demand. They like to see it every month. If I ever forget, I get complaints. So I make sure I do it every month. Yeah.
Well, if you're getting in the 80% range, I mean, that's better than 90% or more of what's, who's out there making calls on things.
I think with that and things like ARV, so let's say the sense is that, okay, it's going to peak on the 17th of the month, let's say. Then you could take some ARV, you can make an ARV tasking to say, okay, on the 17th, is it going to be over this price or under this price? To try and see if you can confirm or see what, and then you could have your technical analyst, what are they saying is going to happen around the 17th? And kind of using those different data points, you can get a good grip on what's going to happen. And I've done that a bunch of times. Like, I'll do my chart, and then we have Marty, who's a technical analyst for Future Forecasting Group. So I would have done my chart before the month starts, and then I'll watch his analysis, and he'll be saying, oh, around this day, we might break out here, or we might, it might fall down here. And I'll look at my chart and be like, okay, well, I think we're going to break out because I have it peaking around this time. So it's like you can kind of, using the different, routes of information, you can kind of get a better idea of what's going to happen in the future with some of these financial things. So it's like it's new territory, trying new things, but we've had some good successes, and, we have a lot of subscribers that have done good using some of that information.
And that's the key. And from my perspective is it's all information, and it's an information field. So whatever information is out there, whatever tools you're using to target and interrogate that information are the things that you want to use to hopefully, navigate as smoothly and successfully through whatever that part of the stream is as possible. And going back to this whole thing of consciousness, let me ask you this. Has your state of your consciousness, your awareness of your consciousness, what I call the third person, which is there's somebody who's watching me as I'm watching me be. There's like a different level of observation, if you will. Has that changed as you've had these experiences, like doing a session and then all of a sudden seeing the exact image on the headlines? Has that changed the way that you feel about consciousness?
Yeah, I think quite a while ago, for the most part, I'm more in that space a lot of the time. I'm a little more detached from my direct reactions. I observe myself more than I'm caught up in what's happening. I'm able to see myself from a bit of a distance, and that's just from all the experiences I had. It's kind of hard for me to, I know that there's a whole nother dimension to what's happening here. I know that my experience is just kind of the surface phenomenon of something that's much greater. So it's just a part of my personality trait now. And maybe that's what makes me good at remote viewing as well. I'm not so much stuck in my head in that sense of like, my thoughts. I'm able to observe my thoughts. I'm able to observe my emotions from a distance, instead of just fully being caught in them and being consumed by them. So yeah, I just live my life in a bit of a different way than most people, in that I do have a knowing that, that I've kind of proven on the small scale, doing things like remote viewing, that I know what's coming. Even if I don't know it, if I can't put it into words, there's a part of me that does know what's coming. And if I follow the thread, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to end up in the right place at the right time. And that's kind of hard for a lot of people to do, because we always want to know, we always want to have the plan and know this and then be guaranteed that. But I've kind of
force and guide the events to our particular will, right?
Yeah. I have more of a submission to what is, knowing that it's going to result in something that's beneficial, even if at the moment I can't explain it. I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with not knowing.
Well, at the same time, while you're knowing.
Yeah, exactly. I know, but it's okay if I don't know right now.
I know that there's
knowing.
Something, but but and that sense, that's a sense of awareness. It's not necessarily the way, in my opinion, the way we use the term psychic or psychic abilities or skills. It's something else. I think that word has kind of been overused and abused, and there's some other definition for it. But for me, I discovered in my path, I was always looking for something that resonated with me, that gave me a definition, an explanation of some sort that explained my experience. Because I was having an experience that, as I was saying earlier, the narrative I was given about the reality I was inhabiting just wasn't working. It's like, oh, no, this is not right, because I'm experiencing this. So I went through, it took about 20 years, and I actually had a Christian music ministry in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was with the Pentecostal church, and so I had a band, and we'd go sing and minister at youth homes or youth authorities and rest homes and prisons. Beat them over the head with that Bible. My God, if you don't do this, your shit's not going to be happy on the other side. And so I went through all of that, and I realized that all of the stuff every time I looked into it, the more questions I had. The more questions I had, the less answers I got. It kept ending up on faith. You got to do faith. It's like, I can't just suspend belief or suspend reality to accept this belief. As I was trying to find something that gave me some kind of definition, all the theological things weren't working. I started delving into the philosophical and then the Eastern side, and I became a shiatsu practitioner in the 80s. I learned traditional Chinese medicine, kinesiology and herbology and so forth. And shiatsu is Japanese for acupressure. So same meridian, Chinese meridians and points, but no needles. Because needles and me have never, ever, and will never, ever get along. Just don't come at me with one of those. I'm out. So I started learning Tai Chi in the 90s, and then I became a Tai Chi instructor. And during that time, I started studying the Tao and the I Ching. And that's primarily what I follow now. That is my philosophy for navigating reality, because there's no hierarchy. There just is, and a flow with either you go or the flow will make you go kind of model. And to me, that really opened up the idea of exploring consciousness to the point of trying to understand, what is this thing called consciousness that we all share, that nobody can define? It's the hard problem in all sciences, and yet it is the one ubiquitous thing that if it didn't exist, would reality exist? We don't know any of those things, because there is no, and going to my question about using AI or, some of these tool sets, you can't program emotions. You can't program intention. You can't program drive, motivation, ambition. There is no formula for that. You can put all the math models and machines you want at that problem, and I'm sorry, you're not going to get it. So having this HAL 9000 Terminator singularity is just can't happen with our current physics. And the way this, gritology billiard ball model of defining the materium is being used, it just doesn't work. All of that comes from consciousness. And so if you look at just what are the characteristics, the nature, the habits of this thing called consciousness that we all seem to share in a common stream of consciousness, occasionally you get to poke out of it, in and out of it, which is what I think remote viewing and non-local consciousness is an example of. It's slipping out of the stream to the other parts of the stream, out of the common stream. But that stream that we're in all still has its own flow and its own mow and its own go. And you can still look at the data and the information within that stream, and you can prognosticate. Looks like it's going that way. Right? Looks like it's going to end up over there. But the real fine-tuning of being able to read the infinite field in the event stream is the non-local consciousness. It is that methodology, the protocol, the practice of accessing this part of the innate part of consciousness that we all have. Does any of that make sense? Or
I agree with you. We're so absorbed in a certain kind of intelligence, what we call intelligence or logic, all these different things that in our society are the cornerstone. You know what I mean? It's like, if you want to be successful, you got to do these things. You got to be, you got to be book smart. You got to get your degree. You got to do this. You got to do that. None of those things really involve the things we're talking about right now. They don't really involve so much introspection or the subjective things that come about in your awareness that can lead you in a certain direction. Those things are, for the most part, they're not given as much importance. They're just after the fact. And if something happens and it lines up, it's like a coincidence or, or whatever, or it's lucky or it's wow, that's cool. And okay, back to reality now. That's kind of how it's.
Well, that was an anomaly. I'm not sure where to put that, but okay, it happened. Now, where's that bag of Cheetos?
Yeah, yeah. It's a interesting anomaly. Yeah, that's what it's usually called. So it's like, in a way, I do think that the direction where things are going with the technology and creating AI and all these different tools, I do think in a way it's going to make us loop back to ourselves and consciousness, because who created that? Like you're saying, it's like, yeah, okay, that stuff is cool, but who created that? I mean, our awareness, our consciousness created that. What's that about? What's that thing about? How did that, where does all that come
Let's
from?
go poke around in there and see what's going on.
Yeah, it's like, you think it's interesting that an AI can generate this or that. Wait till you see what you can generate if you put a prompt in there. Because that's essentially what remote viewing is, right? We're putting a prompt in to awareness, and it doesn't know what it is, or it's not supposed to know what it is, and you can get the information out of it. So it's like,
and you guys have the craziest prompts, right? It's a code. You
yeah,
look at it and go, all right, so I'm going to throw this code at you. You have fun.
one of the
see what you get.
Something that's very interesting to me is that now that the AI things are more easily accessible and things like that, I always see people online, and I have nothing against it. It's just so interesting to me. They try to make the AI remote view. Like, they'll give the AI a target ID and see if it can describe this or that thing. And I just think that, that's interesting, but isn't it more interesting if you could do it? Isn't it more interesting if what happens when people do it? It's like, I don't know what it is that we're so preconditioned to put everything outside of us. You know what I mean? To put it over there. You know what I mean? It's okay when it happens over there, but when it happens here, it's like, we can't accept that. I feel like the technology community would be completely accepting if AI could remote view. If they've discovered that, yeah, AI could describe a blind target with accuracy. They would be so happy about that. But you try and tell them a person can do it, and it's like they're going to grind your teeth, they're going to deny it, they're going to be skeptical. It's just it's just such a bizarre kind of mentality that we have. I just, I don't know if I'll ever understand it.
I did a call-in with a guy a couple of years ago, and fairly intelligent guy, real sharp, which is he had a live call-in, and I said, I think I got some stuff I'll throw at him. He was basically, he would go after theological folks, Christian apologists and stuff, and he'd basically beat them down with just his knowledge and his words. And I said, well, the guy's he's pretty smart. So I got on, and he says, so what do you want to talk about? I said, well, I think the whole consciousness thing is really where, this reality is kind of heading, and where actually the reality of reality actually is. And he says, so you're talking about like psychic stuff? And I said, well, yeah, for example, remote viewing, for example. And he says, remote viewing. Okay, you're one of these guys. And I said, look, if I showed you empirical, demonstrable, documented evidence that it works, because it does exist and there's a shitload of it out there, would you have a different opinion of it? Is okay, well, who would be a remote viewer? And I said, well, I don't know, Dick Allgaier would be one guy that I'd put up as somebody who's, all right, I've written something on a piece of paper, get a hold of Dick and tell him to what's on the piece of paper. And I went, it doesn't work like that. Oh, okay, well, it doesn't work. That means it doesn't work. And he kicked me out of the show.
Yeah.
And I've seen more of that kind of thing, just across the world of woo in period. I mean, Cliff High gets knocked around all the time because of his predictive linguistics. And there's a whole bunch of people, hey, he's never called the thing. It's like, okay, you apparently haven't looked at the data. But that one that Dick did, I think it was on, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Cliff's Target, where Dick ended up with Trump and Rogan.
Yeah.
Explain that, Lucy. I mean,
yeah.
And that was fully documented, and sure as shit, it happened. The whole time stream and slip and divergence and whatever people ascribe to the concept of time, you forget that. There was a target, there was a drawing, and then it eventually happened. Yeah. What do you need more proof than that? What is it that people need in order to realize the reality of this?
Yeah. In my experience, it's like, I don't know if I can ever prove it to somebody. It's like, no matter what I do, I could draw exactly what's in the envelope 100% accurately. There's always still going to be someone saying something. You know what I mean? That's what I've realized. And it's like, the best thing is for them to try it themselves or do it themselves. And even then, they might still deny it. They might still say, oh, it was a lucky guess or whatever. I just try and document everything that I do. So I timestamp a lot of my work on the blockchain. So it's like, even if, we come out and I say, oh, I drew this assassination attempt, and someone says, oh, well, you didn't publish it before, or, whatever it is. I have the timestamps, you know what I mean? I can go on the blockchain and say, look, here it is. You know what I mean? I published it here way before on this date. So, I'm trying to be as thorough as I can in terms of being transparent and honest with my work. Because, obviously, why should someone believe if I come out and say, oh, I drew this thing and it happened? Obviously, why would someone just believe me up front? Of course they're going to want some kind of proof. So, I try and do that. But there's a difference between, and this is something Stanley Krippner talks about. It's like skeptics and then there's scoffing. You know what I mean? It's like two different things. It's like skepticism has its reasons, and it can be, it can be reasoned with, you know what I mean? Skeptics can be reasoned with if they see data and they can change their minds. Whereas the whole scoffing thing is just like, they're not even trying to see what the data is. They're not trying to understand the phenomenon. And that
That's
whole
just
thing,
monkeys in the peanut gallery throwing shells at you.
yeah, it's like, oh, let me write this down, and yeah, Dick Gallagher, tell me what's there. It's like you want to be so scientific when it comes to the things that you like to study, but now when it comes to the science of remote viewing, you're not even going to take a moment to understand how a tasking works and what makes a good remote viewing target and things like that. It's like they don't want to put in the time to even get a base understanding of how the phenomenon works and how the data, looks when it surfaces. And it's just, it's just kind of childish. It gets kind of childish and stupid after a while.
Well, as I have said, when the last year I was doing some shows with, we call ourselves the Geezer Geeks. It's a bunch of old guys that sit around and flap our gums on Saturday night about the events. And last August, I said, all right, guys, we need to make our election prediction. And there was still a lot of, well, I sure hope Trump wins, but I don't know, it's looking kind of sketchy, who knows what's going to be pulled and this and that. And I said, my feeling, not my psychic ability, not any kind of vision or any kind of bolt from the blue or any kind of anything else or, gazing and navel gazing, okay? It feels to me, going back to what you and I were talking about earlier, it's a feeling, a knowing. The original word of for knowing or to know is gnosis, right? And gnosis, kind of like the student and the Ka thing we talked about, gnosis meant not only knowing, but it's something you felt in your bones, something you felt. So I said, all right, I'm going to cast my geezer gaze out, and it looks to me like by the middle of November, and this is all documented because we were doing a live stream, and I said, it looks like the middle of November, the election will be clearly over, and it will be nothing more than a formality from October 15th on. And they're going, well, why do you think that? And I said, it's the way the energy is moving. I don't care how much shenanigans are going to be pulled or attempted. It's going to be overwhelming. And then I said, it will be a landslide. And then the 2 days before the election, a friend of mine also has his own shows. He's a graphic artist, and he also does tarot. So he does a Sunday morning show, and so I got on and I said, all right, Scotty, let's pull some cards. Toss a little tarot. Here's the interrogation. Will we know it's over before the polls close? And he pulled 3 cards, a King of Wands, a Queen of Cups, and Ace of Pentacles, I think, which all were basically yes cards. So the night of the election, it was clear. I knew it was going to be a landslide. I didn't think it was going to be as big and to me, it was the vote vibe felt around the planet. And we're still kind of resonating and ringing from the reaction of that. I think humanity got a big cosmic bitch slap. So what I felt was all of a sudden for 30 years, I've been complaining about government secrecy and crap and the medical system and the health system and the knowledge system and all of it just being completely full of shit. And now I'm seeing all of it being revealed as completely full of shit.
Yeah.
So on my merch store, my Mindwear apparel, one of the first shirts I made was validated, vindicated, victorious. But I've been, the black sheep of the family, the tinfoil hat wearer, the conspiratorium provocateur with my friends and family for decades. And now it's, when I talk to them, it's like, well, how do you like me now? How good does it feel when you put something out there and you're not sure of it, but you feel that you have that knowing about it, that you're good with whatever it is that you put out there? That, like we were saying earlier, sans the ego or the investment in its return. You're just putting it out there, and then later on the return comes to you. Reality brings it back to you, and you go, hey, good one, here you go. How does that feel?
Yeah, it feels good. And it's a bit different with the remote viewing because I know I can be intellectually honest in the fact that I'm usually blind to the target. So it's not like anyone can accuse me of purposely trying to put out a certain narrative. It's like I didn't even know what the target is at the time that I'm producing the information. So it's like I'm being as honest and transparent as I can when I put out the information, and I'm completely and admittedly open to being wrong. You know what I mean? I'm not here saying I'm the all-knowing, omniscient, always right. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's what I get from the other side all the time. It's like, oh, you guys are wrong or this and that. It's like, yeah, I mean, no one's over here saying that, that we're right 100% of the time. It's just such a, I don't know.
Well, that goes with that other axiom. If you're never wrong, then you're never trying.
Right. And like,
right?
so many
come
times,
on.
like, I like that sometimes when we do stuff for FFG, they'll take some clips of it and they'll put it on YouTube. Right. So some of the things that we do, is only on the private site, whereas sometimes some clips of it end up on YouTube. So like, we did a session on Elon Musk in 2023. We did a session on Elon Musk. And so in that session, I drew him, I drew his face. I drew this guy. He's wealthy. He's an inventor. He's a mastermind. He's a technologist. I'm describing him. And then I draw the Capitol, and I drew the president, and I said this guy is going to be in the Capitol, or he's associated with the president and the New World Order, something. Yeah, I didn't know what it all meant. I just, I didn't even know who it was, right? I'm just blindly working this target. Then, we get the target reveal, and it's Elon Musk. And it's like, okay, I'm sitting there saying, what, Elon Musk is going to be in the White House, or he's going to be in the Capitol associated
What's
with the
going on
president?
here?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Let's move on to Naeem and go through his data. Naeem.
Okay, so then here's Elon. Pale white, blonde hair, inventor, problem solver extraordinaire, ingenuity, evil genius, hated or loved, and it's a divisive topic. And then here, this was like, I don't usually see people, their full body. Like I usually see their face, or I'll see like if they're doing something, I'll see them. When I saw him here, it literally looked like a pose. Like it was like seeing a video game character. Like he was just like standing there posing. And the sense I got here was like, very well dressed, Caucasian, suited. Mathematics, science, genealogy are his interests. He's like a consultant, mastermind genius.
Mm-hmm.
I get like complex algebra, or something about sequences and sequential. He has a reputation, but then I get like he's in a secret society or tied to an elite group, members only. I even get like a trickster, but trusted by some. And I thought that was literally almost exactly the kind of pose I saw. So,
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, this is some more here. Male, 40 plus, pale, Caucasian, business, media, corporate type person, bold, intimidating, courageous and outspoken and brave, but has problems or issues. Again, I get like the mastermind. He's trying to like calculate or solve a messy problem. I felt like he has a plan or a blueprint that feels like societal and organizational, but it's like a team or group effort that's being played out or is playing out. In technology, finance, education, and again, I get this geographical, topographical, maybe that's the tunnel stuff there. Evil genius vibe. Here I see a wheel type thing, rotation, currents, charge, amperes, generation. This felt like a free energy type device to me. Something with a wheel on it that looks shaped kind of like this. So we'll see if he's maybe working on something like that. And then this, I don't know, this came to me, so I just put it in there. I see the Capitol, and I see first I see a person at a desk, which I'm assuming after the fact now is like a president or the president, and then the Capitol, and I get like overthrow, cancel, constitution, demands, tear down, disable, new world order. So I don't know if Elon's trying to become the president or.
So nice session, Naeem. Fascinating.
Here we are a couple years later, and he's right-hand man. He's on the TV with Trump speaking from the Capitol, running the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency. That's there. That's on YouTube. That was posted on YouTube way back then. And you could see the comments. Some people are like, oh, this is garbage. This is, what are these wackos talking about? And now, months later, now you see some people there saying, oh my God, he was right. How did he know that? And it's like, hey, I was okay with being wrong, but you better be okay with me being right. That's the thing. So
that's sweet.
yeah, it's like, hey, it's there. It's an experiment. That's how I always see, the remote viewing thing. It's an ongoing experiment. Every time you do it, it's an experiment. It's an experiment that we know works and can produce good information, but it's always an experiment every time it happens. So I'm okay with it going wrong. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. So, but acknowledge the truth to it, acknowledge when it's right, don't be so quick to dismiss it when it's right. When it's wrong, you're quick to dismiss it, but when it's right, what happens then? You know what I mean? No one wants to acknowledge it in those moments. And it's like,
yeah. Can we have a little balance, please?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
That's why I asked to have this conversation with you, Naeem, because I have been a follower and a consumer. I really want to explore more of the technique just for myself, but I have had way more fun just watching all of it unfold with you guys at Future Forecasting back in the 90s when Courtney dropped his book, and then started Russell Targ's work, that Third Eye Spies, for people who haven't seen it, highly recommended. It's one of those you go, oh, okay, there's that stuff going on. But as it's unfolded, Dick just did an interview with Glenn Wheaton, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that as well. When you see the amount of work and the adherence to these people that go on about follow the science, and all that, it's like, well, yeah, every time I follow the science, all I'd find is money. And it's not science denial. It's, look, scientific method has been breached. And it's just like what Doge and what we're seeing with all of this government exposure of just corrupt and broken systems, that some of it's by design, a lot of it's just organically, it's just corroded into a bunch of corrupted crap for decades, and you can't unfuck that. It has to be replaced. So the idea that there is models, there is methodology, there is protocol, there is scientifically documented steps, and it doesn't even have to be science. Systems and processes are what's missing in the majority of how people think and experience life. They don't think about, well, if I do this, then that'll happen, or if I plan ahead, maybe I can think about this, oh, I didn't see that. And just more engagement with the reality that they inhabit. And it's difficult, I think, because of all of the carefully crafted and curated narrative of crap that's been stuffed into craniums that's caused, chaos and confusion in the consciousness, which spills out into the conversations that people have, and nobody's going anywhere. They're just bumping into each other. Clearing that field by focusing on the origin of our existence, of the reality we inhabit, which is our consciousness, is what I'm really hopeful and trying to push as much as possible. And having this conversation with you today has given me a whole lot of hope. And thank you very much for sharing the reality that you inhabit with consciousness, because I think if anybody wants an example of how to start understanding the consciousness you inhabit, watch Naeem's work on his YouTube channel. All the links will be down in the bottom in the description. Watch Future Forecasting Group. Listen to and look at the empirical data that's actually been around for decades. Decades this stuff has been around. Just because it's there doesn't mean that you can deny it, or that you have to deny it. Because it's there, you have to examine it. And you've got to do it with some kind of observational neutrality. Sans all the bullshit that everybody keeps wrapping around whatever the subject is. Musk, as we were talking to the tech bros, they all use first principles thinking, right? And to me, that's what I call in my philosophy the nut of the nugget. What is that thing that you're really trying to understand and examine? Get rid of all the wrappers and the bullshit and the nonsense that people have put around it, and look at it and examine it for what it is, and then expand and add information, the more information that's available. And that's literally what you guys do with your protocol. You go to that blackboard in your mind, you get into that Zen zone, and you have detached from ego and anything else, and you're focusing on the information that you've been asked to go look at. In its purest sense, you're looking for the nut of the nugget.
Yeah. I mean, physically closing our eyes, you're literally, shutting out the world in the sense that you're blocking off all this information that's coming in, visually. And that's freeing up space for to process information, because you're actually always processing visual information. Like, to us, it feels like nothing. We're just breathing and, we're just living. But yeah, all this has to be processed every moment. There's all this processing going on just to give you the illusion of what's, physically outside of you. So, and, when we go into the remote viewing state, in order to get that moment of insight, to get that clarity, you want to try and shut out some of that, the outside noise and what's happening outside, and tune into that part of us that is connected with the greater field of awareness, which is some kind of unconscious or subconscious or, whatever kind of word that, people want to use to describe it. But it's there, and it's what's pulling the strings for your whole life. It's what's, making everything happen. We're taking credit for something that we ultimately aren't worthy of being credited for. You know what I mean? It's like we're just puppets on a string when it comes to our, where our thoughts and our, motivations come from. You know what I mean? I like to think of it, we're like a worker in a factory, and there's a conveyor belt with stuff coming by, and then what we think of as the ego or the conscious mind, all we can do is just pick up what comes off that conveyor belt. Sometimes we don't pick up something, sometimes we let some things go by, but that's the scope of our choice-making process. It's like, yeah, we don't
And
really
sometimes
have...
you're like, sometimes you're like Lucy and I Love Lucy, where she's standing there and all the cupcakes coming by and you're shoving them in. You're trying not to miss one. And
Yeah. So it's like, we got to take a moment and understand the wider scope of what's going on with ourselves. You know what I mean? All this stuff on the outside can entertain you forever. You know what I mean? All this stuff, politics and government and the world and what's happening here and this show and all these addictions and things that we do. But really, it's the control or the power or the what's really important is what's happening inside, and, figuring that out, because that's the key to living a better life ultimately, and getting to some state of humanity where we're actually, I don't know, more in line with our natural state or something. I don't know how to describe it, but what's going on right now is, I think we're a far cry away from where we could be. Yeah.
I think that we're kind of heading in generally a better direction. Do you see that? Or
Yeah, I think it's getting better because there's, more information is available to people. So before, we didn't have much choice in terms of what we could focus on. You know what I mean? It was kind of like you were spoon-fed. Everyone was spoon-fed kind of the same thing with no way to look away or turn to something else. Whereas now there's so many different avenues and ways for people to put information out that the chances of someone kind of breaking free of the trends of society is a lot higher. You know what I mean? But it also comes with a whole bunch more nonsense, right? There's also a whole bunch of people just putting out, a whole bunch of nonsense and distractions as well. So it's a double-edged kind of sword. But
the responsibility of knowledge is the thing that I am most concerned about going forward. I think the liberation of information and the ubiquitous access to it is critical and required as we move forward, but it's going to be messy because the whole idea of how to think was replaced with what to think. And that's clogged the craniums of too many carbon units. And the shift that I think we're going to see as people realize the reality isn't what they were told, there's going to be a lot of head explosions and people going, oh, shit, you mean this thing that I believed my existence depended on isn't real? Yeah. And we're going to have, I think those of us that are aware of those things and know that that's going to happen to a lot of people are going to have to be compassionate to those that are going through it, because it's not going to be pretty for them. It's certainly not going to be pretty for us, because we're going to have to deal with them losing their shit. But we also have to realize that we can't save them all, and it is a personal choice. It is something that people have to make the decision among them within themselves to wake up to this new reality and take responsibility for the knowledge and the information that they get. So I think we're going to see some carbon unit crashes and chaos going forward, and it's going to be unfortunate, but it's going to be necessary, because the majority of this change, I think, is going to be extremely profound. I'm feeling more optimistic in my this iteration journey than I've ever experienced or ever felt. I'm very optimistic, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in this transformative disruption that I think we're going through, not only as humanity and a species and the planet, but I think it's also in a cosmic sense. I think the telemetry that we have indicates that we're getting bombarded by this galactic current sheet of energy that is something that seems to have some kind of cyclical nature to it, but it's very profound in the way it affects the energetic manifestations that we are. And we're seeing it manifest in the sun and the earth and the plants and in ourselves. And I think that that's actually a good thing too. I think the energy shift we're in is facilitating this transformation of humanity, that I could be just high on my own fumes, but I think we're entering the age of consciousness, and some people call it enlightenment. I think we are entering a phase where the consciousness is going to become the focus of reality, from which understanding and knowledge and wisdom and enlightenment can come from. You can't have those things unless you're conscious of them, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm very optimistic. I mean, I'm able to see the things that are going on in the world, and even with the negative things that happen, I mean, I have a knowing of being at peace and being able to go with the flow. And I think a lot of people see the direction of technology or AI and robotics. A lot of people see that as a very negative thing, and of course it has potential for negative things to happen, but I just think that the focus on information, our understanding of information through technology, is getting so advanced that I think it's almost impossible for us not to start to look at consciousness. Like you're saying, it's going to lead to having to look at consciousness. You can't do brain implants and talk about digital telepathy and all this stuff without at some point saying, okay, hold on, wait, but how does this happen in the biology? How does this already happen in reality? It's gonna, the doors that it opens up will ultimately, I think, lead back to consciousness. So yeah, I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for now. I mean, the fact that I can do remote viewing and reach so many people and, have work published and have people see what's happening and change their minds and see reality in a different way. I mean, that wouldn't be possible at any other time in the past. I mean, this is now. The now that I'm in is beautiful, and I'm looking forward to just continuing to play my part to the best role that I can. Yeah.
Well, Naeem, I am grateful to have been able to connect with you and have this conversation, and certainly just been in awe of watching your work unfold, and which led me to say, hey, I really got to talk to this guy because he's connected in that space that I think our future is in. Our reality is now, but our future really is going forward. And I couldn't be more excited for the future of humanity, but I am extremely excited and very grateful to have met you and had this conversation about your experience in it, because I think you're in the pioneer. You're in lead Jeep, my friend. The future's coming, and you're making a path out there, and God bless you for it, and thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My pleasure being on. Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.